Okay, good evening. This is day number 135 of making little videos. Describe a day or thought in the life of a schizophrenic. My name is Dominic, and I experienced schizophrenia for quite some time, possibly my whole life. And don't believe I am diseased or that I am crazy, but that I am subject to a cognitive war, something that NATO terms things. On day 17 of these videos, I express why I call myself a schizophrenic rather than targeted individual. And on day 45, I express why I make these videos in the first place. I am trying to humanize myself amidst the dehumanization campaign I've been subject to, and also to combat stigma that schizophrenic people experience as experiencers of a underworld reality or some paranormal reality that we experience. And uh I experienced a mental illness, but I believe it is inflicted upon me from technology and stuff. On day I've written a book on medium.com. It has examples of technologies that could have been used for the past 100 years to create schizophrenia, and that's coming out into the public domain, like voice hearing technologies and things like that, as well as my thought processes, which could have been reason for me being subject to this program. And all right, I'm going to start today. I started off talking about something. I had written something online, and I was just going to say I don't make the videos or I don't write my book to embarrass anybody or call anybody out. I'm not trying to do that. I don't want accountability and punishment for people, and I can't speak for everybody else that experienced that kind of thing in our society. As I say, I've experienced a type of fascism for the past 15 years for sure, and I that's not really where I'm coming from with these things. I would like some sort of restitution, and I think that there's I'll talk about this maybe at the end of this too, because I think there's already been kind of like a restitution for myself if I'm just accept that to some degree. Like, I have my brain back, and that's beautiful enough. But I would like some sort of restitution. I have to admit, but like I don't know how that would happen. Like you would if you do restitution from government institutions where you sue the government and you bring all the crimes into the light, it's going to result in the total dissolving of institutions which are there to protect people and uh, there to protect people and there to benefit people on a wide range. And I feel like that's kind of what the purpose of this whole program was. It was designed to maybe undermine institutions that are there to protect people and benefit people in our society. And there's very nefarious forces at play with this. And my program is connected to the Donald Trump rise into office. I've experienced the fascism tied into his fascism, and so you know I choose not to sue the government. I would maybe could have like reconciliation centers or restitution centers for targets in the future or something, like community centers, or maybe I say like my life has already been sort of restored to some degree in a very small way, not in a full way. I don't know that I can get a full restitution, but uh, you know, there's a lot of people suffering out there, so I'm not the only person who has had his life turned upside down by governments and corporations and stuff. Maybe in mine, in the targeted individual way, it's a very crazy way that it's done. So, you just take a look at what's going on to brown people around the world right now, and uh, you know, that's just something that's being taking place on a wide range, like a race war, and it reminds me of Lothrop Stoddard, who was this race warrior tied into the government and Harvard and things way back in the 19th century or 20th century. And he wrote a whole book about like the coming race war, or like the about civilizations warring with each other. And it just seems like what's going on around the world right now with like ICE and Israel on Palestine and the war on terror and Saudi Arabia genociding uh, Yemen, that it's like some sort of crazy race war. And yeah, so uh, I've expressed previously that fascism that I subject to uh, was tied in, it had racial overtones to it. They were trying to get me to dislike immigrants, and that took place for a decade previous to Trump coming in the second term. And you know, so that's part of a dehumanization campaign. And I guess for some reason I was at the center of something, and I was at the pinpoint center of things. And I think the whole world was involved or whatever. And so, now I'm, like I say, I'm experiencing some sort of restitution that's probably tied into Sophia. I've taken the Gnostic idea, and I think they have always been at work throughout this whole process. And so, yeah. All right. So I don't want to say like I'm not restored. To some degree I am, but I still would like full restitution, because I was working out the monetary thing in my head the other day, and the disabling and the reputation degradation, getting people to disrespect you everywhere you go, uh, being raped by Donald Trump in dream worlds and stuff like that, is like, it's like some sort of, and various other types of rape or whatever. I'm heterosexual, so it was like these were males raping me, and so it was not welcomed by me, and in the dreams or whatever. And so, and I'm not, I'm definitely on board with LGBTQ rights, so don't take this as like a homophobic thing. It was a weaponized form of rape, like done to Iraqi prisoners and stuff like that, through a military entity that controls those types of things. And so, just that's just an example. Or the way, various ways I was tortured for 6 years earlier, and the disabled for a while, and I was adding it up, and uh, you know, it was resulted in me losing out on about $800,000 at least, because I would have been, if I had my way, I would have probably become a teacher if I don't change course. And the average teacher pay in California right now is $100,000. And I would never go into teaching now, because I would never be respected by the students, because of the feed I'm on, and the way my privacy is just destroyed, and the way I'm subject to defamation campaign and things like that. And so uh, I can't go into that line of work, and just the various ways I'm attacked psychologically. And so, but that I would have probably done that, and the average pay is $100,000, and so I would have been doing that for the last 13 years. And I'm not saying I would have made $100,000 for 13 years, but I would have been making something. And if I'm living at home, which I had intended to do, was come back home and you know, uh, that's a lot of money that was taken from me, and so plus the retirement and all that. So you know, financial restitution, I'm probably not going to get. uh, but maybe, like I say, like targets can get restitution some way, somehow, like maybe community intervention or universe intervention, like uh, aliens, or I don't know that they're watching or whatever, but like they can do things and stuff. So it's like, I think, like I say, I've already had some sort of restitution, but just not the financial. And so I can get back to work in another month or so. So we'll see what happens. Uh, all right, I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this book here called Your Brain on Art. And in the book, it's a very good book. I highly recommend it. I think I'm gonna probably read this book a couple times over the years. Maybe I'll read it now, and then a few years from now, I'll pick it up again. But I was gonna read something out of it because it was talking about how art can elicit disgust. It can elicit uh, empathy. It can elicit understanding about someone else's trauma, or it can even elicit uh, acknowledgement of something beautiful in form, and in various many different forms of beauty. And so that's what I was talking about here. And so this is kind of good to just get somebody saying that. And I was going to go ahead and read something out of it. I was going to read an excerpt from the book, and it talks about how you're you're transformed on art. All these various ways that it can transform you. And it says, the arts you will read throughout this book trigger and release neurochemicals, hormones, and endorphins that offers you an emotional release. When you experience virtual reality, read poetry or fiction, see a film, or listen to a piece of music, or move your body to dance, to name a few of the many arts, you are biologically changed. There is a neurochemical exchange that can lead to what Aristotle called catharsis, or a release of emotion that leaves you feeling more connected to yourself and others afterward. Throughout this book, we'll be sharing details from studies that show how specific art forms release certain hormones, the neurochemicals, which in turn affects physiology and behavior. So they're talking about how you basically become biologically changed by taking in art. And it goes on to talk about salient experiences where multiple emotions that are illicit in an art piece can create a salient experience, and it changes the neurotransmitters of your brains, and you form different connections in your brain. And so I thought that was really interesting. And so uh, I read that in that book today, and I was going to read something else out of this book right here called When the Earth Was Green. And in this book, it talks about how, it's talking about going through like how the earth became green, in plants coming out of the ocean, and invertebrates and animals walking from the ocean or whatever. And it says, in life, if life is a symphony, plants will have begun to play an altered tune that complements classical arrangements of the seas, a few seemingly quiet notes that animal life has already begun to join. And so I was going to point out, so it's talking about life is a symphony. And right before I read that in that book, I had just finished reading out of this book the few pages that I read about how art can elicit all kinds of responses in you. And I was thinking that like your life itself is art, like just the way you live your life or what you do in your life is an art piece. It's like we're living in an we're living art. We're living a life of art by just being alive. And then I take a look at the plants and say that life is a symphony, and that is like art. So it's like I had that thought, and then I read that, and then it makes me think about the scientific research that's being done on the fact that scientific research that's being done about how our brains are connected on a quantum level to the universe, supposedly, and to all time and all space in the universe. Our brains are connected. And it's just made me think, like, that moment that I'm just laying in my bed reading the book, I happen to pick up those pages, I think those thoughts in those moments, and then it all lines up in the book. It's like a synchronicity, and the brains are all connected. And then it also makes me think, like, our brains themselves are connected and networked up to 10,000 kilometers from each other. So like everything's connected. So like our thoughts, I'm thinking a thought at this moment, somebody else is thinking. It's in me thinking this thought at this moment is influencing somebody else's thought or miles away, and so it is all very interesting. And so yeah, that's what I wanted to think about today. And it makes me think, like, the back to get back to the restitution and stuff. I don't know how people can get restitution for the various crimes that are being committed to them. It's in today's day and age. And I oftentimes selfishly think of my own way of getting restitution, but I don't know how the world gets restitution for the crimes that are being committed against everybody. And so I wish everybody luck on that, but I don't know how that will happen. All right, goodbye.